Alright guys, DSF, I'm going to do a great book review, History of the Railroads, one of the great railroad battles of 1901, Harriman versus Hill, Wall Street's Great Railroad War. It was written by Larry Hogg, and there really was no story about this until 2013. I mean, there's a lot of articles you can read, but to put into a story in this book was done in 2013, which is very interesting. And Warren Buffett owns the Burlington Northern, which is a lot of what these railroads that are in this story are. And he had a very cool quote. So I'm going to read this before I start talking about the book. Here's Buffett's quote. I first read about the Northern Pacific Corner when I was 10 years old. When I opened my office on January 1st, 1962, I put on the wall a framed copy of the New York Times of May 10, 1901, describing that fateful prior day. Larry Hagg now tells the full story and enjoy every word of it, Warren Buffett. Because it is a very great book of history. And I'm going to get into the book here, so if you want to read it, you can always pause the video or you can just listen to what I'm about to tell you and then go listen. But I'm going to get into some details and stuff, so if you wanted to get it all from reading, I would go now. But anyways, let's get into this. We had the most northern railroad in the States at the time was the Great Northern. James J. Hill built this without any government help. It was the first private railroad that was built continental, from basically Minnesota all the way to past Seattle to the West Coast. And there was the Northern Pacific. So Great Northern is Hill's, and then the Northern Pacific went bankrupt. So Hill and J.P. Morgan, House of Morgan, got together and in the late 1890s got this railroad back profitable. And, for a long time, for a few years, they were working pretty well, but they had a problem. Their problem was they needed to get to the south and to the east, and right now they didn't really have access. So they were looking at buying the Burlington and Quincy to get to Chicago. And so the House of Morgan and James J. Hill, they kind of put in, some bids for this Burlington and Quincy to get access through Chicago and, basically make the railroad even more better pricing and, bigger. But what happened was the Burlington and Quincy was owned by a lot of people in Boston. And these guys, they liked the profit that they were making on this railroad, so they didn't really want to sell, which they demanded a high premium on the stock price. And they wanted cash. They didn't really want to sell with stock and other stuff like that. So that's one half of the story. Now we get over to Edward Harriman, and he was teamed up with, he was the CEO of Union Pacific, and he had Jacob Henry Schiff, which was head of Kuhlman Loan Company, a New York City, basically second to J.P. Morgan in banking. And then he also had another banker, William Stillman, which was the head of Citibank of New York. And then William Rockefeller, not John D., but William, John D.'s brother, was also kind of on this camp. And what they were doing was they were kind of worried. They were saying, well, if we have a transcontinental and Union Pacific, and if we lose, or if Hill and Morgan get access to Chicago, that will hurt our business, and this isn't good. So what they were thinking was, well, how can we protect ourselves, or how can we get back at Morgan and Hill? And what they did was that Northern Pacific, not the Great Northern, but the Northern Pacific, they started buying shares in this, pretty much under Hill's and Morgan's nose. And one thing was, Morgan left to Europe, so he was like 8 days to get there, and he was going to be gone for a few months. So it was kind of a sneak attack on buying those shares, because really the House of Morgan wasn't really paying attention. And all railroad stocks were going up. President McKinley was elected in 1900, or the end of 1900 there, so 1901. And railroad stocks were going crazy. They were up like so much because it was basically bubble territory. And so no one was really thinking anything. Like, all stocks were going up, but Northern Pacific was going up a little more. And of course, the Burlington and Quincy was going up a lot too, because those two were trying to get bought out by two different camps. And basically what ended up happening is the Northern Pacific, once Harriman Schiff thought they had enough of a majority control of the common and preferred, they went and confronted James J. Hill and stuff like that. And that's when basically everything, all hell broke loose on the corner. And I want to bring up a few things real quick before we get there. One, nowadays, you couldn't really do this because you have to file a 13F or something. You have to say when you have a certain percentage of a company nowadays. Like if you get 5 or 10%, you have to say, hey, and disclose it. Back then, you didn't have to disclose it. So you could be buying up shares, and if shares go up, people can wonder why it's going up. And, there was a lot of speculation in newspapers of why Northern Pacific's going up. Everyone kind of knew Burlington was going up because Hill and them wanted it. So that was interesting. And it also made a lot of just normal people rich because some people bought Northern Pacific shares, just regular people, and they didn't know why it was going up, and they sold it at high levels because no one was selling the shares. No one was, only Schiff and Harriman were buying. So if you're a normal guy and you bought some shares at a few bucks and it goes up over 100, you're going to sell. And really the only people that got hurt on this corner were speculators that went short the railroad. They just thought it was, because they were basically paying more for Northern Pacific than it's worth because they wanted control of it. It was nothing really about the value of the railroad. It was more about the real estate and the control that you would have. So a lot of shorts were, selling stock that they didn't have, thinking that they could buy it back later. And that's where we get the corner. And then that's where the story gets really interesting and it's crazy. So anyways, after everything, if you read the book, you figure out everything, what happened, the agreements that were made and everything. We have a trust company. And the trust company was basically to, have peace between all the rivals and stuff, and it was basically a holding company for all these different railroads. Well, if you know history, Theodore Roosevelt got in because McKinley got assassinated. So when Theodore Roosevelt took over, he basically ran his campaign against these trust companies, and it got broken up. And there's a lot of history about Theodore Roosevelt versus the business leaders and how that kind of shaped different aspects of the railroad today. And the book does a great job. And like I said, it's a great story. It goes through very fast. And, I just find it that if you like history or if you like railroads or if you like business, you'll like this book. So I think it was overall, I recommend it. Hey, and if you read this book, give me your comments. If not, just tell me how you like this video. And yeah, I really recommend Harriman vs. Hill, the Wall Street's Great Railroad War of 1901. So thanks for watching, guys, and that was the book review. So take it easy.